That's just how statistics work, right? I do you know the basics here? Have you graduated from high school?
We resolve about what you're lying to me about. Then I'll talk to Wick. So I would find it really hard to believe that there are people driving on the highway that people know there are Iraqi soldiers, like an invading force.
So you think that there are no civilian deaths in the highway of death incident?
None that's I've seen evidence for. No.
Okay, you think there's no evidence to suggest there were civilian deaths? Do I have that clear from you?
No compelling evidence. No.
Okay, so in the overall death toll of the war,
to be clear, from everything that we've just read, seems like Wick is actually right. There does not seem to be any verified account of civilians dying.
Right, we understand that there ends up being about 3,000 Iraqi deaths. There ends up being about 1,000 confirmed Kuwaiti deaths, 600 missing persons, meaning like the overall death toll in terms of per Iraqi soldier killed to the average civilian death ends up meaning it's about like 1 in 20. 1 in 20 of the death in that war. So what is it about this specific incident that makes you think it's some kind of miracle where no civilian deaths occurred?
A miracle, right?
Yeah, it'd be a statistical miracle for no civilian deaths
in a single strike, right? Do you think that in every single
strike?
Hold on, stop.
No, you're already mistaken. Do you think it's a single strike?
It was 10 hours of bombardment, or well, maybe more than that. But it was several hours of bombardment. It was on a single target.
I asked you, is it a single strike?
Oh, we're gonna play the pedantic game. Okay,
it's not a pedantic game. I asked you, yes or no, is it a single strike?
Define a strike for me.
You don't know what a strike is?
What do you think a strike is?
Whatever you mean by strike.
Definition.
What did you mean by strike?
What do I mean by strike? Military action.
So one military war would be a strike. Okay, I got it. So
obviously not. You could have many military actions within a war.
This still ends up being. Look, do you agree with the approximately 1,000 number of the highway of death, or do you think
200 to 1,000 is reported? 1,000's the high end.
Okay, so if you think it's the case, it's 200 to 1,000. That means expected losses given the overall estimates of total war military deaths.
One second, I'm messaging Synth. I'll see if Synth wants to talk about this. Yo, my dude, I'm going over your debate with Wick. Would you be down to chat in a little bit to follow up on it? Okay. Now that's done.
Ends up being about 1,000, the approximately 1,000 number of the highway of death, or do you think
200 to 1,000 is reported? 1,000's the high end.
Okay, so if you think it's the case, it's 200 to 1,000. That means expected losses given the overall estimates of total war military deaths ends up being about at least 10 civilians dead. So why is it the case that you at the lower end or at the higher end, it ends up being, if you use the 1,000 number, it ends up being, it would be is it 1 divided by 5? So it is being 50 deaths. So do you think it's the case that like through some anomaly it's like this is going to be a drastically lower number than the average for some reason on a major 6-lane highway?
Okay, so you do know this isn't how statistics works, right? There are 1 in 10 people are gay. So does that mean 1 in 10 people in my chat right now are gay?
On average, the expected value of your chat would be yes, 1 in 10 would be gay. On your chat in particular is probably higher than that.
It is Twitch. Fair enough. But you understand how that when you are trying to do this trick where you look, overall, over the whole war, right? Over the whole war, right? We had this was the ratio, right? Fair enough. But then you try to microcosm down into an incident of a limited period of time.
Sorry, I want to answer my question eventually.
Okay, I am answering your question. Maybe you'll listen. Maybe you'll learn. Okay.
Okay, I'll wait until you're done. Then I'll ask it again.
Fair enough. So again, to imply that because over the whole course of the operation, about 5 weeks, right, that we had this amount of deaths, this amount of soldier deaths, this amount of civilian deaths, and so that in this particular frame of time, a much smaller frame of time, right, between February 25th, February 27th, right, or 26th to 28th, I believe it was actually, You were saying that it didn't match up with the whole of the war, right? What a miracle it was. That's not a miracle. That's just how statistics work, right? I do you know the basics here? Have you graduated from high school?
Okay, you're claiming that you answered my question with that, right?
Man, they're going straight for the blood sports, aren't they?
What was wrong with what I just said?
Sorry,
what do you disagree with what I just said, actually?
Wick, I want you to answer my question. Do you think you've answered my question with that?
Ask it again.
Can you just be honest with me? Do you even remember the question?
You've asked me a few things. Give me the question.
Just the last one, the one you said you were answering. Do you remember that question?
So you were implying
this is so pathetic.
That this was a statistic that I was saying. Oops.
Sorry. A statistical anomaly for it to be this much of a massive outlier on a massive 6-lane highway that expands all the way from Kuwait City all the way up to Iraq. It'd be massive. If you think it's the case, this is a wild outlier. I just would like to know, why is this an outlier?
Why is it an outlier? Because it was a limited period of time, a limited target. So yes, in a very small section of a very large war, it was different statistically.
Jesus Christ, I had to crank up the volume at first, but Jesus Christ, Wick. Just drop you down a little bit. Fuck.
Thinking about how stats work. You're so completely confused on how stats work. I guarantee you if I asked you what an SD was, you'd have no idea how to calculate that. You're dead wrong. So just because it's a limited time...
Are you retarded?
Doesn't mean
are you literally brain damaged?
Can I ask you a question? Wick, what is an SD?
Again, have you answered my question? Or are you retarded?
On.
Do you have brain damage?
What is an SD?
Do you have brain damage?
Okay. I've answered your question. Answer mine.
What does this have to do with your... You're using a statistical argument to say, well, in this instance...
This is pathetic. You don't answer a single question I have for you. You continue...
Because your questions are retarded.
And then you demand... No, your question was retarded.
Okay,
your question
give me a body. Show me one death. One civilian death. One civilian death. Show me one. Show me one.
Oh, man. I'm messaging Wick now. Yo, I'm going over your debate. Yeah, he's got the Gorillas and Sons mindset, but I feel like for the Gorillas and Sun mindset, you gotta have like I feel like for the Gorillas and Sons mindset, you have to have higher gain that doesn't necessarily get louder, right? It's just the fact that you're it's just the mere fact that you have the gain so high that gives you the Gorilla and Sons effect. It's not gonna be the same, if it's also like destroying people's ears. You just need the effect, not the actual volume.
Show me one. You have thousands. There are thousands of deaths. Show me one.
Yes, I can show you one.
Show me one. Show me one.
Listen.
You have 1 minute to show me one death. One civilian death. You have 1 minute.
Calm down, retard. You said my question was retarded, right, Rick?
Okay, that was done. That was quick.
Oh, was that it? Was that actually it?
A section of a...
Sorry,
what do you disagree with what I just said, actually?
Wick, I want you to answer my question. Do you think you've answered my question with that?
Ask it again.
Can you just be honest with me? Do you even remember the question?
You've asked me a few things. Give me the question.
Just the last one, the one you said you were answering. Do you remember that question?
So you were implying
this is so pathetic.
That this was a statistic that I was saying. Oops.
A statistical anomaly for it to be this much of a massive outlier on a massive 6-lane highway that expands all the way from Kuwait City all the way up to Iraq. It'd be massive. If you think it's the case, this is a wild outlier. I just would like to know, why is this an outlier?
Why is it an outlier? Because it was a limited period of time, a limited target. So yes, in a very small section of a very large war, it was different statistically.
Look, you're trying to tell me I'm mistaken about how stats work. You're so completely confused on how stats work. I guarantee you if I asked you what an SD was, you'd have no idea how to calculate that. You're dead wrong. So just because it's a limited time...
Are you retarded?
Doesn't mean
are you literally brain damaged?
Can I ask you a question? Wick, what is an SD?
Again, have you answered my question, or do you have brain damage?
What is an SD?
Do you have brain damage?
Okay. I've answered your question.
So what does this have to do with you're using a statistical argument to say, well, in this instance...
This is pathetic. You don't answer a single question I have for you. You continue
because your questions are retarded.
And then you demand... No, your question was retarded.
Okay,
your question
give me a body. Show me...
So, yeah, I thought there would be a little bit more here, but yeah, it kind of does just seem like... Oops. It seems like Synth is actually just relying on the statistical probability, which doesn't seem like a very Synth thing to do, right? Usually for, hardcore debate bros, proof is everything. Evidence is everything. And then after that is the logic stuff to extrapolate from the information that you're getting. I don't know why Synth is saying, well, this many, it was this many Kuwaitis that died, and there were this many Iraqis that died. And then, you're going to tell me that it's improbable that there were civilian casualties? I don't know how that follows at all. Like even from a logic standpoint, I can find issues with it pretty easily, because again, like I started the entire little segment off saying, seems like to me personally, it seems like there were no deaths, right? It doesn't seem like there are actually any pieces of evidence that shows what Synth is saying. So it has to be relying on, okay. Yo,
what's good? I saw just the last bit there. I haven't been watching your stream. You told me you were streaming. Checked it out. I understand your the place you're coming from with this, but it's just because of the fact that it's a 6-minute debate with the rage quit. So it's what you do when you're evaluating evidence, right? You start out by setting priors, and you want to set your priors based on whatever the general tendency is, right? So your priors in a case like this, you've probably heard of burden of proof talk or something. That's all dependent on what your priors are. And in this case, our priors should be relatively high. There was at least one person dead, probably around 20-ish should be our priors. But if the argument is over like whether or not this is representative, what you want to do is check, is it the case that this doesn't have the same kind of evidence that we have in all the other cases? We'd expect that to be an outlier, right? Like if it's the case we see no evidence whatsoever in this specific case that there are deaths, we'd be like, okay, that's surprising because usually there are. So that would mean we'd lower our credence here. So that's kind of the argument that the Wick side wants to make. The issue though is there's the direct kind of evidence that we have in all the other ones, which is just, do we have witness testimony? The answer is yes. We have like British officers reported by Robert Fisk who directly say it is the case that there were civilian deaths. They witnessed them firsthand and buried those bodies. Not buried them, hid them, but buried them like you do with a dead body. So you have witness testimony. You have high priors to begin with. All of the evidence is exactly what you'd expect for a relatively a small scale number of civilian deaths, like 20 or 50. So the evidence does just track exactly what we'd expect if it is the case there were civilian deaths, which is we'd have some witness testimonies and we'd have high priors. It's kind of all the argument is. And it's all you really need for an evidential case, because it's all you really have in cases like these. Cases of did civilians die or not, it's always evidential. You're not going to have like some logical proof for it. You can't say something like, contradictions entailed by there not being some. Because worst case scenario, the person could be like, oh, it's like somebody really artistically drew a very good photograph. Like there's never a way that you're ever going to have perfect evidence. You can just raise your credences.
Yeah, and I can.
So you start out with a priors argument. Yeah.
But like my priors are this: if there is some kind of military action, generally speaking, civilians stay away. Now, like I'm just gonna lay everything out because I know where the conversation went and what your points were, right? But like civilians stay away, so it probably wasn't the case that civilians died just in the crossfire because like the convoy was going towards Iraq and then the people coming the other way were just driving. Because
well, to be clear, that's not how most civilian deaths in this conflict work. It wasn't the case that people were like in this particular case we have reason to believe that they had Kuwaiti hostages.
Right.
So we'd expect there to be civilian deaths, yeah.
Right. So when I didn't know anything about this going in, right? We did a little bit like maybe 20, 30 minutes of research. We read through the Wikipedia. We read a couple of articles that were linked in the Wikipedia. We checked out a couple of things. And I don't know, maybe the like burden of proof thing is really hanging me up on your argument here, because it feels like, yeah, we can say like it's very possible that there were civilian deaths, but I don't think that we can say that there definitively were whatsoever.
You could have watched a civilian died, and you can't say with absolute certainty, right? Oh, what if you were hallucinating? What if we live in the Matrix? Right?
Okay, but you know what I mean.
Certainty. But the point is, well, I kind of generally get what you mean. But the issue is the burden of proof isn't on my side. I'm giving proof. I'm giving evidence anyways. But the burden of proof's on the side who wants to say this is an outlier. Now, if you want to say it's an outlier, you should say there's some kind of difference about this case than the general cases that would make us lower our credence. But what we see is it's the same kind of evidence we have everywhere. Like the other side they say things that are kind of the same. I'm not saying they're Nazis for this, but they make the same kind of arguments the Holocaust deniers do, which is, well, show me the mass graves. If I don't see any mass graves, it must not have happened. But there's good reason to believe that we're not going to know the specific names, because 1 in 3 of the Kuwaitis who died in this conflict, nobody knew, nobody had confirmed their deaths. They were just missing persons reports. And we have no idea where in particular they died. They just died during the conflict. So it's really hard to identify names in a conflict like this of people who died. We wouldn't expect that kind of evidence. Because if I ask you or anybody in the chat, can they name one civilian who died in the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait? The answer is no. We can't name one. Like in particular smaller scale conflicts, it's even harder to name one.
Well, I would think that we would still be able to find, some documentation, right?
Well, we do. We find documentation of people who give witness testimony. That's the kind of documentation we'd expect.
Right. But as far as I read just now, it doesn't seem like there is any documentation of, a civilian being killed in this particular action.
There is. In this particular action, specifically the Highway of Death incident, Robert Fisk reports that there were two British officers who both confirmed civilian death. And they don't have a bias towards the Iraqi side. They've got a bias against it. So they've only got reason to lie in the opposite direction. There's no reason to think they'd be being dishonest. There's no reason to think that the witness testimony we're seeing here is like unlikely to begin with. We have good reason to trust the witnesses here.
But then you weigh wouldn't we then weigh what the officer, like what one officer says versus another? Like, why are we taking these guys' words as opposed to, the investigations that happened afterwards, et cetera, et cetera?
Sorry, which investigations happened afterwards confirmed that there were no civilian deaths? Or even suggested there were none?
Let me see here. Let me see, pull this up. There was... Because I know
the May Commission hearing is going to say that there were civilian deaths. The New York Commission hearing? It was May 11th.
We didn't get listen, we didn't do that much research. All right? I don't have all these people's names off the top of my head. Did I close out the tab? There was one. Let me see if I can.
In the time I've researched this, which is, predating that WIC conversation, it was like I had done small amounts of research prior to this flare up of the Twitter discourse surrounding it. And then after I initially saw the Twitter discourse, I think it was a week ago or something, started digging into it before forming any opinion. From digging into it, I was able to find not a single reputable source that ever made the claim there were no civilian deaths, and a single one. And I found plenty of reputable sources who say, yeah, there were probably civilian deaths, which is like the obvious conclusion in a conflict like this, given they had Kuwaiti hostages, given that generally there are civilian deaths. And we see the same kind of evidence we'd expect here that we do everywhere else, and we wouldn't doubt that there's civilian deaths in those other domains, sorry.
Right. Okay. Let me see here. Okay, what I'm pulling my statement before about the investigation. Journalist Georgie Ann Geyer criticized Hirsch's article, saying that he offered no real proof at all that such charges, which were aired, investigated, and then dismissed by the military after the war, are true.
Sorry, that Hirsch article is not about there being civilian deaths. The Hirsch article is the Hirsch article she's responding to is in regards to a claim made by Hirsch that a brigade of U.S. soldiers, after a group of Iraqi soldiers their individual group had surrendered, and given up their weapons, that they had then been gunned down. And
yeah, sorry, I was mixing these in my head.
To be clear, her claim isn't even as bold. Not Hirsch's, the person responding to Geyer. Her claim isn't even as bold as saying something like it didn't happen. Just like, well, look, from what you've given us, all you've done is kind of like say that there were reports, and like I don't know, like the U.S. says they were that didn't happen. So who am I supposed to trust? Well, I mean, obviously in a conflict like this, where the U.S.'s long past history of lying about the conflict, you'd probably trust the journalist above the U.S. But that claim doesn't have anything to do with civilian deaths. That's
I was mixing these up
soldiers.
again. Only read this like 30 minutes before, basically before we start talking. Okay, so I don't know. I guess like for me, my standard of proof for me to like change my mind on things is fairly high, but it's not hard to change my mind if the proof is there, right? So if there were like reports of
there's an issue here, which is making up the mind initially that you then need to change, right? That's picking the prior, right? In this case,
the prior was agnostic, and then after looking at all of the I say all of the articles as if I did a lot of research. Like look at the 2 or 3 articles that I saw. There was like only one reference to civilian casualties. And that was in the Time magazine article.
Time does say that they probably were civilian casualties,
yes.
but they aren't pulling that from like, it's the case that they've gotten a witness. They're pulling that from the case, oh, yeah, look, they had Kuwaiti hostages, of course, there's going to be civilian casualties. I don't think even the U.S. is condemnable for civilian casualties. They just obviously happened. If you want to take a look at like witness testimony, Robert Fisk is going to be the place to go for that. There's a couple of other instances of witness testimony. I think the Robert Fisk one's the most reputable. This is the one most worth mentioning because it's coming from British officers.
Yeah, can you link that to me? How long is that?
For you.
Yeah.
How long is the article?
Yeah, is it like a short novel or is it just like an article length?
It should be one article. It's relatively short. It's not a novel or anything like that. I'll grab it for you. It'll take me a little bit to find it though.
Yeah. Take your time. Yeah, I guess like for me, what I would like to see to like believe, because again, the only thing that I've seen thus far that even mentions civilian casualties is the Time magazine article right here that you seem to know about, and they say probably, right? But I haven't seen anything past that. And then,
well, what we're trying to figure out isn't do we have certainty of civilian deaths, because we never have certainty. What we're trying to figure out
is that not what the debate was then?
No,
Sorry.
It's about. No, there's an active claim on the table from Wick, which is that there were not civilian deaths. There is no evidence of civilian deaths, which is a much bolder claim. My view is that civilian deaths happening, probably like 95 or above % chance that happened. It'd be really unlikely if it didn't. Now, I don't think we have certainty of anything, but we certainly don't have certainty of things during war. So I'm not going to claim it's like a certain case that civilians died. It would just be wildly unlikely if it didn't happen. It'd be like a really surprising statistical anomaly given general background information we have about how often civilian deaths happen during this war, and the kind of specific evidence we have in this particular case, which is just we do have witness testimony from several different sources.
I would separate in my mind. Yeah, I would separate in my mind the general war and this particular. You guys got caught up on the word strike, so I almost said strike, but this action or whatever it is.
Disengagement, yeah.
Yeah, disengagement.
There's probably even some account of, honestly, I'm trying to be as charitable as possible to Wick here, which is not really worth the effort, but it's like, I feel like fairness to the audience. There's probably some account of the word strike that's like reasonable enough that would include this as one strike. So I'm not gonna like fucking dog on you for that. Also, I like you and I don't like Wick, so I'm gonna be a dick to him. So, I mean.
But okay. I lost my train of thought there. We were talking about distangling like the broader like casualty and like war and what happened in the war versus right here, right? Because like in the broader war, there were probably areas where civilians would get caught in the crossfire, and that led to, civilian casualties, whether it was like in a city or in a town on the way.
I don't want to. I don't use the word crossfire, right? Because it wasn't like, the civilians.
Oh, sure. They might have like intentionally targeted them. I don't know very much about this conflict.
They're civilian hostages. I mean, Saddam Hussein's a pretty bad guy.
Yeah, he's not a cool dude.
Yeah.
So the strongest thing that you've brought up, and that it seems to very briefly mentioned in the Time article is that there were hostages. But do we know for certain, or like
we know for certain they were taking hostages. We know for certain to be very unlikely they didn't have hostages here. We also know they were driving a bunch of commandeered civilian vehicles. So them having hostages, it would be very easy for them to take hostages while they're taking vehicles. And they were already in the habit of taking hostages. They already had hostages.
You know, it would actually be a piece of information that could resolve this entire issue or this entire argument is in all of the, how many people were captured afterwards? 2,000 captured. Were there any civilians with the soldiers that were captured?
Of the 2,000 captured? Well, when you're taking in soldiers who are captured or surrendering as individuals, those soldiers you're not going to take capture of also civilians. So we wouldn't expect there to be any.
Right, but were there, to be more clear, were there any civilians with the remainder of the forces?
I have no idea. That? I don't think we have evidence of whether or not there were or weren't civilians.
Okay.
So I don't think we can clear it up through that route, unfortunately. I mean, it would be easy. I mean, honestly, if you're willing to grant that, like, if there were civilians there, then there were probably civilians elsewhere. It seems like we can do the same kind of inductive argument from generalities about the war, and then also witness testimony here. Like, if we have witness testimony, I don't know why we didn't doubt.
I guess okay. So here's a question. There was between 200 and 1,000 ish killed, right? And 200,000
you said?
No, 200.
Oh, between 200 and 1,000. I understand. You're saying just on the highway of death.
Yeah.
That's true.
All right. So it says 2,000 captured, but where did I see a larger number of people that were a part of the convoy? And okay, upwards of 70,000 to 80,000 troops from defeated divisions in Kuwait might have fled to Basra, evading capture. Would we not be able to find any kind of reports of, like, post-war, some kind of civilian hostage negotiations between Kuwait and Iraq? Or
we do have hostage negotiations. It would be very, very difficult to link hostage returns to specific places those hostages were. So we do have those, yes. I don't think that's the kind of evidence you're going to be looking for here. I don't think there's going to be the kind of connection that you want. The kind of connection that you want here seems like you want, like, well, here is a hostage. They were on Highway 80. They're confirming they were not. What we have instead is, well, wide tendency of the Iraqis to take Kuwaiti hostages and confirmation from witnesses who say that they buried civilian bodies.
Gotcha.
But, like, without any kind of, like, good reason to think this is going to be some outlier or that those witnesses were lying, it seems like it's really difficult to go from to go from this position of there might be some kind of uncertainty about it to it didn't happen. Like, if I'm like trying to weigh credences here, it seems like we should have at least, just beginning, we should have at least above 50% that at least some civilian died. Probably higher, much higher than that given general tendencies of the war. So unless we have some kind of counter evidence to it, we'd expect it to be the case that civilians did die.
Well, how could there be evidence against? How can you prove a negative?
Well, look, this is one of the issues that I think there's like a general tendency towards in Twitch politics, which is the whole, like, burden of proof based on proving negatives versus positives. There's no difference between a positive and a negative statement, right? Any positive statement can be converted to a negative, vice versa. You can either double negation. You could say not X as opposed to X. You could do it through saying something like, instead of saying a murder happened in this room, you could say there was a lack of non-murder in the room, right? Like, you can do the same thing back and forth. There's no difference between the positive and the negative claim. Well,
it's kind of like the classic argument, or the classic example would be like, prove to me that you're not a federal agent. And it's like, no matter how, like, what I say or what proof I show you, you could always say that there's, like, something hidden or something is fake.
You do the same backwards too. Right, it's nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with the
sure,
that being a negative
I'm
statement.
assuming, like in a conversation between you and me, if I were to ask that question, like, there would be no way for you to prove it if I was being bad faith, right? Because
which is why we don't really. What we're trying to deal with here is not absolute proof or, like, mathematical proof. What we're trying to deal with here is just weighing evidence. So, when you drive down the street on your way to work or something, you don't assume every single house on the way there has no owner. just because having an owner would be a positive claim. We know generally the houses do have owners. That's why they're built, right? And so we could say, yeah, person probably lives there. And we can assume that by default. And then on top of that, if we have like a neighbor who's like, yeah, my neighbor lives there, we wouldn't assume that neighbor's lying. We'd be like, oh, yeah, probably. Yeah, there's no reason for you to lie about that. You're a reputable source. You're not the kind of person who has a bias in the opposite direction. You're not a person who has a bias in favor of the claim you've made. So we wouldn't assume you're lying. It'd be insane to go from like, well, there's some chance that house is empty, right? Some houses are empty. We wouldn't go from that to then saying the house must be empty, or the house is very likely empty. There's no evidence that the house is not empty. Because there is evidence. There's both the background evidence that we use for setting that initial assumption, and then there's evidence on top of that of witness testimony.
I'm reading something here that how many Iraqis died in the attacks remains controversial. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, there's some estimates of like above upwards of 1,000, which are, I think those estimates are like unlikely.
It says that it's not unreasonable to assume that 10,000 Iraqis came under attack, although the number of vehicles and the average number of riders could have been less. If so facto, this would preclude the possibility that tens of thousands were killed. Moreover, simple subtraction, riders minus prisoners, cannot yield a reliable estimate of fatalities because many Iraqis were witnessed fleeing the scene by Kuwaitis living in the area. At any rate, there was little reported evidence of vehicles having been filled to capacity with people.
And that gets even more troubling if we don't have like a lot of weighing towards evidence like eyewitness testimony. That gets even more troublesome because even that relies on eyewitness testimony. From like less reputable sources, even not like non-reputable, but just like civilians in the area can be less reputable than like British officers. And there's not even conflict there.
All this is saying all this is saying is that they saw Iraqi soldiers fleeing.
Fleeing, which they almost certainly did. And the reason I think that is because we know they did because of the fact that we trust eyewitness testimony.
And also the fact that is there like no documentation of where they went to? Did they just like disappear into thin air?
Of them fleeing?
Yeah, just like the fact that they fled the scene.
There's the documentation of I think there's documentation of them fleeing because I'm including things like eyewitness testimony. If you're not including that, then I don't know what documentation you'd be
okay. I think that, so in the conversations, because as someone that likes debate and learns a lot through listening to and engaging in debate, I can respect the kind of, and I mean this in a positive way, all right? The hyper autistic type of debate that you and Bunk and like Ask Yourself and the Avi guy engage in, like I can respect the fuck out of that. I think sometimes it's like super based and like how like hard and deep into the weeds you guys go to prove your point is impressive. But I think that it really makes having conversations, like casual conversations, really difficult because we just agreed, but I didn't understand that we agreed until the very end of like a 2-minute or 3-minute monologue. Do you think that might be where like the communication or the lack of communication went down with Wick last night? Or
no. It took us 2 minutes, right, to figure out. Kind of like we might have some like different levels of credence, but we both kind of understand that this is just an evidential case. No, in Wick's case, I don't think it was a matter of lack of communication. I think he like dug himself in on Twitter to this really stupid position. And then he kind of freaked out at me. And like 6 minutes in, he freaks out and rage quits the call. Like, I mean, even if I'm having like an adversarial conversation with that's the first time that I've ever had somebody within like 30 minutes quit out of a discussion with me. In fact, if I think back, like the only other time I could think of somebody rage quitting a discussion with me, it was like a drunk guy on Discord. And even he still spent like 40 minutes at least talking about the issue before just running away. Right? I don't think the difference between the conversation I'm having with you and the conversation with Wick is just like, it's kind of like a nuanced kind of autistic-y approach. And I agree, it is kind of autistic-y. But like, we want to be autistic when it comes to evidence. I agree it's autistic, but I don't think that's the issue with Wick. I think the issue with Wick is just he dug himself into a silly position. You're not dug into a silly position, so you don't have like you don't have the same issue where you're going to want to like freak out or something, because you're not generally the kind of person who jumps to random conclusions on stuff before doing the research, right? You've been doing the research on stream, and even then you're still like kind of in the agnostic territory, right? Wick doesn't do that. Wick jumps to the conclusion.
I still like Wick. All right, I know that you don't like Wick, but
oh my god, let me clarify.
I was just gonna say I don't want, even though no. Listen, if Wick gets mad at me for like still being chill with both of y'all, then that's a him thing. I was just gonna say, like, I like Wick, but I don't watch a lot of his content. So I don't know if that's what he does or not. Oh damn it. I guess fair. Like so like. Is it not as reasonable to have a position that, okay, we don't have any documentation of civilians killed during this engagement, right?
Sorry,
like,
can we just clarify what do you mean by documentation?
Like a death certificate that says like cause of death blown the up at the highway of death. Yeah. Okay. Like some like official documentation like that, right? We don't have like direct eyewitnesses that say that there were definitely, unless the thing that you were going to link to me.
Well, that would be the Robert Fisk definitely does have like direct eyewitnesses that he talked to, right?
Okay, so tell me about.
I don't think it's like
what.
That.
Yeah, tell me what he saw then, because like when I think of like a direct eyewitness, like of a dead civilian, I'm thinking like, okay, this person here is dead. They're surrounded by soldiers, but they're wearing civilian clothes. And
what I'm telling you is that. Yeah, what Robert Fisk says is that he directly interviewed two British officers who said, "Yeah, I saw dead civilians, and I buried them. It's not like I saw them at a distance. It's like, yeah, I saw them up close and personal. I buried them. We don't have good reason to think they're lying, right? It wouldn't be the case to be mistaken. They buried them, right? They were there. If there's any way to tell from a dead body if it's a civilian or not, they would. I mean, they have the opportunity, right, up close and personal. Unless we think that like Robert Fisk's account is manufactured, which would be very unlikely, given his long history of doing pretty good reporting. I don't think we have a history of him lying about things in the past. And he's like a trustworthy journalist who is reputable. So long as we have that witness testimony, and we've got the kind of evidence we expect in any particular case, because I don't think if I ask you any particular conflict in the Gulf War, any particular battle, if I ask you, can you name a civilian that died specifically in that battle? This is like an impossible task. It's a burden of evidence it's a burden of proof that's set so high that it's not possible to meet that in the general case, right? If we can't meet it in the general case, we just induct from the general case here, right? Like we would just say like, okay, well, look, we think there are civilian deaths. If that evidence isn't good enough to prove civilian deaths, we'd have to think there aren't civilian deaths throughout the entirety of the conflict.
I'm not sure if I agree. It's like, I understand what you're saying, right? I'm going to repeat back your point and tell me if I understand it correctly. So you're saying that we have all this eyewitness testimony from all over the war saying that there were civilian casualties, right? If we're to believe them during the entire rest of the war, why are we not going to believe these eyewitness testimony by these British officers about the highway of death? Correct?
Basically, but the only caveat I'd add there is I'm saying for any particular battle in the Gulf War, right? We would say most of these battles, we'd expect to have civilian deaths if we want to say there's civilian deaths in the total war. And the kind of evidence that we have for most of these battles is the same kind of evidence we do for the highway of death. But yeah, but you've basically understood the point.
Yeah, okay. I think for me, like, the amount of eyewitness reports really matters. However credible the people are, right? Like, it's not like these two British officers were out there and they found the two civilians and they helped, dig and bury the last two identifiable civilians, and then nobody else saw it, right?
Well, it's not a matter of nobody else saw it. There were other eyewitnesses as well. It's just these are the most reputable, so they're the best ones to go to.
Sorry, I misunderstood your point.
No, it's okay. The point being is we have eyewitness testimony in this particular case of multiple different sources, and this is just the one that's the most reputable, so that's the one I keep fucking hammering on. But if we take a look at the number of deaths we'd expect here compared to the rest of it, we could just take a look at what is the general amount of eyewitness examples that we have. How many eyewitnesses saw deaths in particular battles, and then see, is it the case that tracks with this case? Do we see about proportional to the number of deaths we'd expect? Well, we don't expect there to be a tremendous number of civilian deaths. It's not like it's like 1,000 or something. We expect it to be like about 20, like 20 or a little bit more, maybe, right? If we expect it to be about 20, how many eyewitnesses would we expect per 20 deaths in the war generally? Well, we take a look at that, and it seems like it's overrepresented here, if anything. 2 is already overrepresented for 20, right? 2 would be enough to be overrepresented. If we have more than 2, definitely overrepresented. I mean, the rate's probably even, honestly, less than 1 per 20 witnesses to deaths. In this particular case, having multiple eyewitnesses should be sufficient to get us to the degree where we're saying, yeah, civilians probably died here. So it's like upwards of like 95% chance that a civilian died here. Especially on like the largest highway in the entire country. Like you could say, like, yeah, people were evacuating, but people evacuate all the time in a lot of different circumstances and don't necessarily succeed.
Okay, you have me on the it's possible, and even likely that a civilian could have been in the convoy as a hostage. I will say I find it incredibly hard to believe that someone just like happened to be there and then got bombed along with that one right there seems very, very unlikely to me, that someone just happenstance was there and got blown up too.
Wait, why does it? They're commandeering civilian vehicles. Why wouldn't civilians be around at all?
So my understanding is they commandeered vehicles in the city, and then they
were slightly fled outside the city at this point,
or slightly
right?
outside.
So it's a very large city.
Were all the vehicles captured on the highway?
We're not entirely clear, so I'm not going to make that claim, right? It's unclear if they were captured on the highway or near the highway. But point being, this highway it's the largest highway in the country, right? But it is also like the portion of the highway they were fighting on was right outside the city, or even like within the perimeter.
Sure. So they captured vehicles, right?
I want to clarify. By within the perimeter, I mean the perimeter highway, right? Not the. I don't mean like any kind of like weird civic code stuff.
Yeah. So I would find it really hard to believe that there are people driving on the highway that people know there are Iraqi soldiers, like an invading force on.
I'm not saying they were driving on the highway. I'm saying that civilians could have been in the area. It's a large highway, right? Like highways aren't built just like in random locations, especially large 6-lane highways, right? That are massive, largest one. I keep repeating largest one in your country. I'm sorry about that.
No, but like
you don't expect that there are going to be nobody
this
around.
Highway, this stretch of highway, right? Like every photo doesn't seem like there is any civilization around. Like beside, like the only sign of civilization.
Even the largest photographs that are like emblematic of this particular interaction, the highway of death thing. Even the largest ones will show the city in the same photo. Like in the background.
Way in the background, right?
Way in the background, maybe like call it like 2 or 3 miles out in some of these. But it like the actual conflict ended up happening. I think I think the conflict happened, what was it? Was it like 10 miles is like the main place? Let me do the math on that instead of just fucking guessing.
Yeah. While you're doing that, I'm going to send you like this picture to like illustrate what I mean. Like you've probably seen the picture, but like there's no frontage roads.
It's an aerial shot. You can basically just see like the highway from a top-down perspective. I agree that you can't really see much from this perspective. It's not the case that this is like it's like a top-down aerial photograph. You wouldn't be able to see much anyways, right?
Well, yeah, I'm just like clicking through Highway of Death on Google, and I don't see a building anywhere nearby.
Top one here has the city in the background.
Okay, city in the background. I'm talking about like in the area of the bombing, right? Because that's what the relevant area that we're talking.
Large area of bombing. I think you correct me if I'm wrong here. I thought the area of the bombing was in like Al-Jazaras or however it's pronounced.
Al-Jahar.
Somebody in chat, correct me.
Al-Jahra.
Probably, yeah. That sounds close enough to the
I've been up the first time I read it too. I'm trying to see if there's like anything that says how many miles of it were bombed. massive column. Got it. Can anyone in chat help us find how long the stretch of road was that got blown the fuck up? And past the evidence side of things, the argument here is whether or not there were civilians caught in the, I say crossfire, but you know what I mean. Is that the only part of this that the disagreement is on? Like, let me go back to your tweet that I had up.
Tween who?
It was your first quote tweet of the Scrub King.
The issue I have with the Scrub King was he claimed there were no civilian deaths. That was the issue I have with that. He said there were no documented civilian deaths, which is like, you'd have to have some like kind of loose account or maybe like really, really narrow account of documented to say that. And that was it on the comments underneath his own tweet. He was kind of making the argument that there were just no civilian deaths. So even with a narrow account of documented, I don't think it's going to get out of this. It was like just a really bold claim.
It's more like there isn't a source for the opposite. The closest thing to evidence of civilian casualties I've been able to find are unnamed British soldiers claiming to have buried women and children, despite this being one of the most photographed incidents in the Gulf War.
Yeah, the claim that there's no evidence. The closest thing to evidence is witness testimony. I don't even think it would be an issue. What we expect. It'd be bold to claim that like because of the fact that we have witness testimony, we'd expect there to be like no deaths or something. Wildly.
There is a shadow of a doubt in my mind about what he's saying here, right? Because it's possible that there were civilian casualties and they just weren't photographed. But like, there are a lot of photographs, and there were a lot of people on the ground, right?
Of like the vast majority of civilian deaths in the war here, no, there weren't photographs.
No, I'm talking about of this incident.
Even in this particular incident, I don't understand why you'd expect it to be photographs of civilian deaths.
I mean, there were there were. I don't want to say like dozens, but there are at least more than I can count on one hand. Journalists that went in there afterwards that had cameras, because there's about 5 million angles, some of which I can't show on screen, I guess.
What portion of the deaths here do we think were photographed?
Oh, there are some photographs of dead people on Google. Those are.
I was asking, like, what portion of deaths do we think were photographed here? Right, like, do we think it's like?
Well, I would actually
80%?
assume.
I think it's 1%.
Well, I would assume. I have no knowledge, like no deep knowledge of military procedure. So, if you know this, let me know. But is it not the case that after any military engagement, strike, whatever, after whatever happens in any military conflict, there are going to be people that go out to corroborate like what happened during an attack, to make sure nothing untoward happened, to take photographs.
People are going to want to corroborate. People are going to want to corroborate things that might be in dispute, but nobody in the mainstream media or in academia disputes there's at least one civilian death, which is not really in dispute. And the civilian death point, like, it's not even the kind of thing that the U.S. would dispute, because it's not condemnable. Right? It's not like morally wrong that there was collateral damage in a war.
Right. Yeah. So I guess like I'm looking at this. I feel like there would be more. You're saying that nobody disputes it. I feel like there would be way more coverage over the fact that there were civilian casualties by just like the media, not necessarily by, the U.S., because it didn't seem like this was an unwarranted strike or that it was a war crime in and of itself.
Well, look, the Gulf War wasn't like unpopular. I don't think the media would be like harping on about collateral damage and what's like an already high civilian casualty war.
So you don't think that there would even be any reporting on
pushback, or like, no, I mean, there'd be like some reporting. This would be people being like, well, look, I mean, a couple of witnesses here and there, like a handful of witnesses over here. Over here we have we know they're Kuwaiti hostages, so we'd assume that there's going to be like you have like cases like this, but like nobody's going to dispute it. It's not like it's the kind of thing that's going to be in tension or something. It's like let's say somebody comes out and they're like, no, there were no civilian deaths, not a single one, zero in this particular case. Like, whose opinion? Like, if somebody changes their view from there were to there weren't, who's going to change their mind about like the broader war or about this particular engagement? Nobody's going to change their mind based on that. Like, nobody would care. It's like, yeah, there's civilian deaths. It's a war. There's no reporting, right? Obviously, there's like reports of witnesses. It's not like the issue though is like nobody's trying to like make sure that you have pictures of the dead bodies or something because it's.
I would assume that due to bureaucracy and like trying to like make sure that they're covering their own ass. Like, I'm pretty sure that the military does do stuff like that where they, take account of like how many people died here. What was the method? Kind of like crime scene investigation where they prove, that they didn't do anything wrong. I'm almost certain that they do that.
Yeah, I mean, on the conditions they're doing that, just granting that they are, because I mean, it seems likely to me that they are. I don't understand why it'd be the case that we'd see any of that. I don't think I've ever seen a case of like.
Well, would there be a generalized report afterwards?
Yeah, the report from the U.S. Yeah, I think that if the report from the U.S. said anything regarding civilian deaths, I haven't seen them ever denying it, so I have no clue. It doesn't seem like they're disputing that. And if there are civilian deaths and they're not disputing it, like I don't know why what are they going to do? Just confirm civilian deaths? Show us dead body pictures? Like, why would they do that?
Well, I don't think they have to show us dead body pictures, but I would take like some sort of like investigative body. I would put a lot of stock behind that.
Why do we expect that an investigative body of the U.S. would put out a report saying that they did kill civilians if they killed civilians?
I think that in a system like the U.S., our especially pre, I would say that there was like this golden, not golden age, but this good period between like 1990 and 2010, where it was there was a lot more oversight and a lot more
during the Gulf War. I wildly disagree. We have like
I might be wrong about I might be wrong about the Gulf War because again, this is the first day that I've ever looked at anything about the Gulf War. Besides, like I've seen pictures of the Highway of Death, but this is where I'm coming from. I feel like there's enough oversight.
Can I just ask you? Is there like any other case in the Gulf War of the U.S. doing this? Like we know that there were civilian deaths, right? So is there any other battle where the U.S. come out afterwards and be like, yeah, by the way, we killed a couple of hostages. Oops.
Well, I don't know. I would assume that they do that sort of thing. I'm not saying about like this one specific incident. I'm talking about like I would just assume that after any major engagement or like a strike ordered by U.S. forces, there would be some sort of like forensic task force that would go around to, say like, hey, we have evidence for this. You can't accuse us of a war crime for doing this because we have evidence of, these orders being found on this person, right? And
but would they also say like, but by the way, you guys could accuse us of a war crime for this. If it was a war crime, lucky it's not. Like, how would they post things that like aren't going to do anything to make them look good?
Well, I would have
make
to
them look extremely bad, obviously, but like,
I would have to see like an example of one of these things to see if they do that, or if they, because I mean, like we have oversight both in the military and in our legal or our political systems that we can look at forensics. We can look at
we don't have that in the military. We have like no right to that. Like, why would they delegate it?
What do you mean?
We don't have any right whatsoever to press release on whether or not they killed somebody.
Hold on. What I mean is, I was speaking to oversight, right? Like there are military tribunals and court martials. There are consequences for not following.
Yeah, but none of that would be illegal.
None of that would be
illegal about collateral damage.
Right, but they would have to see that there was collateral damage, and then to say that because of the actions that we did, there was collateral damage. However, it wasn't a war crime because of this.
Wait, why would they need to see if regardless of if there was or wasn't collateral damage, either way, they wouldn't be guilty of any crime. So why would they have to investigate that? It's like looking for evidence of a thing that's not illegal to do. Just be a waste of resources. It'd be like the cops are like searching my house or something to see if I own weed and I like live in Rhode Island or something. Okay, so I'm just allowed to do that. I can just buy weed.
If there is like, it would be more like if you murdered someone, right? Or you're being accused of murdering someone, and then you get all the evidence around the case to prove your innocence.
Well, no, the issue is that murder is illegal and civilian casualties in war are not. Right? It's not a matter of like...
Hold on, that's not necessarily true, right? You can
It is. Murder is illegal. Kill it definitely. Are you saying like there exist some cases in which civilian casualties are illegal or something? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were saying that you didn't think that, and I was about to.
No, I agree. There are some cases. It's just whether or not the civilian casualties are legal or illegal in this case wouldn't depend on whether or not there are civilian casualties. Right? Like the civilian casualties aren't. They're not like.
I understand what you're saying. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
we're majorly talking past each other. I'm a retard. Okay, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, I would just assume that it would be part of like a standard like forensic, looking into, not necessarily like, hey, we didn't kill any civilians that in an illegal way, and here's the proof for it. It would just be like, here are all the facts about the situation as it happened on the ground, and here are the reasons why we conducted this strike, because of this, and this reason. Our actions were justifiable.
Press releases on why they conducted the strike, right? They have done that. But none of those are going to have anything to do with like whether there were or weren't civilian casualties. If they have justification for doing the strike, then a couple of civilians getting killed in the meantime is like, yeah, it sucks. Welcome to war, right? It's not illegal. There's no problem. Like we're not going to.
I don't know. Maybe it's unreasonable of me, but it does feel very, very hard for me to believe that there is just like no documentation of civilian casualties.
And by documentation, you're using that in like a really narrow sense again, right? Like you're using that to refer to something that we generally don't have for most interactions in war. Most battles in war that have civilian casualties, we don't have the kind of evidence you're looking for.
I would assume that and maybe I'm just like super wrong about all things war. Okay, I totally will admit my lack of knowledge on things. All right, I'm making a load of assumptions, but the lack of evidence that you're talking about, sure, I understand where you're coming from. One second, I gotta pause my game because I'm losing my mind. Okay, refocus. I took my ADD medicine. I should be able to think. But like if there was certain questions, independent researchers like going to check out the claims, right? Like I assume that there would be like death certificates for someone that died in Kuwait because of Iraqi forces, right? Like there would be a death certificate that said died due to gunshot wounds to the upper thorax or whatever.
I don't think there's a single death certificate that I've ever seen anywhere of any specific conflict in this war that'll attribute it to the specific battle they died in when it comes to civilian death. I don't think a death certificate does that.
Well, you would be able to like know where the like location that they were at when they died, right?
No, not for most civilian deaths in this war. The vast majority of civilian deaths in this war, we have no clue where they died.
I don't even know how that happens then. Like genuinely, because at that point we're talking about.
I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. So the thing to like keep in mind is that if in a war it's like there's a lot of epistemic fog. It's very confusing what's going on. If your family member doesn't come home that night, it's not like that they're like they died in a recent bombing or something. Like it's just you never know if they're just missing, right? Like you have these like countless cases of I say countless, it's very counted, it's 600 missing people during the overall war that are you just don't have a death certificate for. You never know where specifically they died. And in the case of the other 1,000, it's like also really hard to trace where exactly they died at. Like, what exactly is the reason why they died? Which particular time do they die at during this conflict? Because it's a war's a mess.
Sure. I don't know. I'm not convinced that there weren't any civilians that died, but I'm also like just as on the other side of that, like that I'm not sure that, yeah, I'm like 50-50 on both of these. It feels like there's no strong reason to believe it in either direction unless you're just talking about your priors and then the testimony of two dudes. But it also feels like there would be a lot more people.
Well, to be clear, we've got more than two testimonies, right? We've got
If you have some like sources that you were going to use from last night, let me look over those and I'll go over those, and then maybe we can do a follow up and I can say that you were like super right, or I'll find some problem and then.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's super fair. I'll actually just give you. I'll just compile all the sources I was using, just like send them over games or something.
Yeah, that works. Why is there a website called IraqiBodyCount.org being linked in my chats?
If that's about, so I know there's like a couple of reports about the overall death counts of the war, and there's some that'll
2003 invasion of Iraq.
Oh yeah, but scroll down. That I think that same source also goes over the 1991 conflict, and even specifically the highway of death. That does not go over civilian death counts.
Oh, no.
That goes over. Yeah, that goes over like, I think if you go down to the section of the highway of death, it mentions the vehicles commandeer, but they weren't trying to estimate civilian deaths there, and I mean specifically they're trying to estimate like Iraqi deaths. And the civilians we expect to be dead here are broadly going to be Kuwaiti. Like we might expect that like alongside the family members, we also have some people who are like traveling along with like the Iraqi soldiers.
Yeah, there was a oh shit, there is a word for this. Not a war procession or something like that. Like there's
I think that's I don't know
if that's the correct term, but you know what I mean. Where there were I guess there was the PLO was involved in this. I didn't even know that until I read that. Where there was a bunch of Palestinian militants whose families were following the army.
Yep.
I don't know if maybe those are the ones that we could like point towards and say that they were also killed because of this, but
we'd say they're at risk. We wouldn't say like those were definitely the dead civilians or something. The amount of civilians we expect to have died, like, it's very plausible that they all came from like just one of these camps, right? Like they all came just from the camp of like being Kuwaiti hostages. I mean, 20, right? Is like our expected value here. So it's not. I don't think it's remotely implausible that it's like one died from one of these camps, like 19 from the other, or anything like that. The specific breakdown or split, it could just be like wildly just one-sided.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I'll look at your sources. I'm going to talk to Wick next and see what his takeaway was, and then we can reconvene to either say that you were completely right and 100% based, or if I have a different take after reading everything. At the end of the day, is this argument just because of the strong claim that was made that couldn't be corroborated, or was this also because the you think that there was some wrongdoing somewhere in the Iraq War that like should be accounted for?
I mean, I support the.
Or I'm sorry, not the Iraq War. I mean the
Gulf War.
Gulf War, yeah.
No, I support the Gulf War. And it was really funny. Is like even though I think this is for complete reasons completely unrelated to civilian death count, I think this was a war crime. I think it was a justified one. I think it was one of the rare exceptions. Just super flaming hot take. But look, legality doesn't equal morality. It's the same is true as international law. Obviously, there are sometimes things that are illegal to do that are morally right and justified, and you like have an obligation to do. In this case, I think that like when you're combating like near fascists, like Saddam Hussein's forces, I think that things like killing, surrendering soldiers, which is a war crime. I think that like
okay, well that's
it's pretty hard to make the case that you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. That's something I can push you on, okay? Because the reports that I was reading were saying that they were doing a fighting retreat, right?
No, that You're repeatedly seeing the reports. They were saying they were using a fighting withdrawal. It's a wild mistranslation of the initial ones, which is just which wasn't like you need to attack the Americans in a hostile manner while you're leaving. It was just like, don't let yourself get killed, right? Defend yourself, but leave. And that was in compliance with 660. It wasn't in compliance with 678, which people will bring up, right? It was in compliance with Resolution 660, which was months before that. But the data which it was confirmed that they would be in compliance with the E660 was February 21st. Saddam confirmed that they would comply with the 660. They had the intent to surrender, as 660 wanted. They were making a full withdrawal, and they wanted a Soviet mediation over the negotiations for terms of surrender. Yeah.
Okay. Definitely link me anything that you have, especially on the points of the eyewitness accounts and of that last point. Because that's interesting to me. But
so I'll grab you the link. I know offhand, I can remember that's from the New York Commission, the New York Hearing Commission, which is May 11th, and that was specifically the report from Joyce Chediak that was presented at the commission. I'll definitely send you the link on that as well. I'll probably just type that into Google or something and find the link.
Okay, one sec. They're saying he's lying, but I don't know about what. Yeah, now that I've said that, now they can explain. And then after you find that link for me, and we resolve about what you're lying to me about, then I'll talk to Wick.
Yeah, I mean, if the person in chat lets you know, I'll send you a source and confirm I was not lying. But if they're talking about the surrender thing, the reason why people are like so up in arms about it is because they are Saddam did not initially comply with 660. But it doesn't matter if you initially complied with it. All that matters is if you have the intent to surrender in the moment, and if you have a clear intent to surrender, which he did, then it'd be a war crime to kill those soldiers. But war crimes can be justified. I think that one of the things people want to do here is they're really committed to it not being a war crime because they don't want to say that it was wrong, but you don't have to. You can say it was a war crime and also it wasn't wrong. It's actually easy to do. It sounds like a big bullet to buy, but it just becomes really obvious when you put it into the framework of like,
listen, I love war crimes. All right. I love war crimes of all shapes and sizes. So I'm not that, tore up about it.
Especially against fascists, especially when they're trying to genocide the Kurds. Who must go? Not the Kurds. That's so. All right. But I don't know. I'll send you some sources or stuff. If you have any other questions before I hop off, I'm down to answer those though.
They said the UN resolution wasn't being complied with.
Yes, it was. As of February 21st, it was. Initially, it wasn't. And they're probably conflating 660 and 678. 678 set a deadline. 660 didn't. 678's deadline wasn't complied with. You can't time travel and comply with it in the past. But 660 didn't have that deadline. And so they did comply with it. They complied late. Like I'm not going to tell you Saddam's not a piece of shit. Did a lot of terrible things for a lot of Kuwaitis. But no, eventually did comply. Eventually did surrender, and that makes it illegal.
They were saying it's the 15th.
The 15th of what? March? Is that what they're talking about?
Oh, I would have. Wouldn't it have been prior to March since the...
Oh, nope. You know what? They're talking about February 15th, and they're talking about the 678. Yeah, you are just Chatter, I don't know who your name is. You're conflating 678 and 660. 678 is the one with the 15th deadline, not 660.
Gotcha.
I'll send... I could send sources on that. The Wikipedia page for 660 and 678 would be what I'd send. But I'll just send... Sondsol, I'll just send you a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
I don't want to loop. I think I just asked. Are there any other questions for me?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Send me what you got, and then we can look over them, and I'll make a determination past that.
All right, you have a good one. Peace.
Yeah, catch you later, man. All right. Wick is gonna come on. All right. Just call. Oh, wait. Here, I'll call him here. Howdy.
Hey, can you hear me?
I sure can. All right. So we just went through everything with Synth. I don't think that we came to any conclusive, end to anything.
No?
No. Okay. So as a starter, what was your initial point, or what was your contention, or just tell me?
My whole point here is that the accusation that this attack was a war crime has no merit or basis in reality. No serious criminal court internationally has ever charged anyone for a war crime for this. And any evidence that the only people who are saying that it was a war crime are people who are either not familiar with the incident at all, or B, have a bone to pick with America in general. Once again, it does not violate any of the Geneva Conventions. No civilians even died, or at least there's no credible evidence that any civilians even died. And I wanted to kind of go through the reasoning, right, of why Synth thought it was a war crime. But I quickly realized when he was on that, he just wanted to play word games and do this pedantic princess shit. So I just left the call. I had better things to do with my time.
Gotcha. Okay. So was the entire inciting thing for everyone to talk about this Hassan talking about it?
Hassan called it a war crime.
Right.
And references a war crime. And everyone took turns dunking on him because and that was fun. So, okay. But there's a group of people, there's a class who will just stand him no matter what. Right. And I think that I get frustrated with that kind of thing because it allows us to have lies creep into our discourse, right? Because you are trying to protect your streamer daddy. You are willing to just lie about reality or history or any of these things. And so I was like, no, we got to push back on this. We got to show it's stupid. So I went through it on my stream. We went through for about an hour at least, and kind of going through the arguments of various sides, and just, I think it was pretty clear there was no basis here.
Okay, so I'll tell you where I stand, and then I'm going to try and steelman Synth's point as best as possible without the hyper autism debate stuff.
Thank God, please, yes, I would love that.
All right, so my position is, I think I mostly agree with you. I feel like the standards of evidence that I would hold are it feels like there would be some kind of documentation, whether it's death certificates and then corroborating where that person was found, or even it feels like there would be some way to point out, okay, this person died here, right? So that's something that I'm going to look into after the conversation with Synth, because it doesn't seem like we fully agree as to whether or not that would happen. I feel like it must be that there is actually some way that the U.S. government and the U.S. military defend themselves from allegations by getting a lot of,
We did document civilian deaths during the Iraq War, right? So during the Gulf War, I'm sorry, not the Iraq War, the Gulf War, to be clear, Operation Desert Storm. There were civilian deaths during that, right? I'm not
of course,
denying that. We have recorded and documented them and measured them. And it's not an exact count, but we have generalities, right? A general count. Again, it depends which organization is doing counting, how they're going about counting the dead, et cetera. It's a process, right? But we have that information, but there is no accusation, or I shouldn't say no accusation, but there's none of that for this incident, right? And so the implication that it was a statistical miracle is nonsensical at best. It just does not match with how these things are done. We would never do that, right? We would never say that. We would never take Lav's accusation against Hassan, for example, seriously, because statistically, it's pretty likely that a lot of streamers have conducted sexual assault against women. That's just statistically true. But we would never say, well, in that case, it must be the case that Hassan did it too, because statistically it's likely he did. No, we would never do that. Why would we? That would be silly. Everyone would laugh you out of the room if you tried to make that argument, right?
Right. So that's what I got out of the conversation when I listened to just what you and Wick, or I say Wick, you and Synth actually talked about, right?
Yeah.
Where I was like, well, it feels like you're just extrapolating what happened based off of statistics, and that doesn't seem like a good way to decide whether or not there actually was or was not, right? After talking to Synth, there is a better argument that they're putting forward.
Okay.
And that is, there are multiple eyewitness accounts from credible sources, right? Namely, there are at least 2 British officers and then multiple other people who are less credible but were there on the ground after the attacks. That
can you link me those sources?
I am waiting for Synth to link them to me.
Because there is one report. There's not multiple, to be clear. There's one report that has an eyewitness that I'm aware of. I'd love to be shown if there were more, but there's one. Okay.
You would love for there to be more dead civilians. You sick.
Huh?
Sorry, I'm joking around. Sorry, go ahead.
That's funny. I didn't hear you, and so I didn't get the joke, but that's okay. Peter Frist, I believe that's his name. He released a report where he says a British officer told him that he saw civilian bodies. We don't know the name of the British officer. No one ever corroborated that evidence. It was just an offhanded kind of claim that was made. So when we talk about multiple sources, that's the source. That's it. Like unless there's more that I'm unaware of, that's it.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to see right now. I believe there are 2 British officers that Synth was claiming.
Okay, well, I'd love to hear the second.
Yeah. Right. So that'll be. So that's like my general thing. I feel like they're, as much as we talk about like sources and compelling evidence versus non-compelling evidence, the kind of argument that Synth is making is, hey, so we have this event, right? Number one, it seems pretty statistically unlikely that they would die, but that's not how statistics works, right? Like it seems unlikely that there would be any civilians in the area that would want to subject themselves to being near the,
they all ran away. Like we know what happened to the civilians in the area. They got out of their car and they ran, because this didn't happen like instantaneously. This was over the course of hours.
Right. 10-hour bombing campaign.
Ish. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's here's where the civilians come from that they're claiming, right? And there also might be, but this is not what the thing that y'all were arguing over. There might be, some civilians that also died because they were nearby, and bombs are, as much as we talk about precision missiles, there's always going to be, some explosive factor. So like there were civilians that were nearby, so it's possible that they died there. But there are reports of the Iraqis taking hostages, right? Now, whether or not they had hostages at this specific thing, I guess that's up in the air and questioned, right? Because we don't know if they had. We don't know by me and your standard of evidence whether or not there was.
We do know, right, that in this convoy that there was civilian loot, right? So that they there are pictures. There's just pictorial evidence, right? And a news report in BBC showed this as well on a television report of the charred remains of civilian loot, like hair dryers and shit like that, right?
Right.
But again, we also know that they were looting Kuwait, and so they took what they can. But the implication, right, is that there must have been civilians with them because they took loot, and it just doesn't follow, right? It doesn't follow. Again, we have a ton of images. I know of at least 3 that I could show you right now of dead bodies that are soldiers in this incident, right?
Right.
So are we the idea that there were civilians that died and no one took a picture of them?
That's something that I brought up to Synth as well. Chat reminded me what the response was there, because I don't remember. I kind of feel like that was a weak response, but maybe I'm just like misremembering, even though it was a conversation I just had. But yeah, that's something that seems pretty unbelievable to me, that like of all of the like information that we do have of the highway of death.
Kuwait families coming forward saying that their relatives died in this, right? Where is any of that?
Well,
it's just not existent.
Well, a reasonable argument against what you're saying there is that there are still to this day quite a few people who are unaccounted for. They are reported as missing rather than, killed in action or a civilian casualty, which I thought was a fairly strong point. Yeah. But now this was placing them there.
A 5-week issue, right? Like, that's, yeah. I mean, but again, it's this trick that they do, right? Like that, like, well, we don't know for sure where or when they died, so it's possible that they died here. No, we don't have any evidence for it, but it's possible it happened, so we have to take into account that it's possible it happened. And you really don't, right? You got to go with the Occam's razor on this. When there is no compelling evidence, right? When you have no credible evidence, you just don't make the claim, right?
Right.
I have no credible evidence of a lot of things that I have no credible evidence against either. Like there's no report that says 0 civilians died, right? But why would you make that report in the first place that no civilians died here, right? Why would you even do that? There's just no reason to. And so it's the correct answer, right? When you are faced with a situation where there are multiple possibilities and you don't have correct evidence, isn't just to be agnostic in general. It's not. It's just to go with the most likely outcomes based on, what you know of the situation.
Right.
And again,
I think that's where the disagreement was.
Is that there's pictorial evidence. There is some video evidence with the BBC. Anyway, we have soldiers dead. Soldiers dead that we can see, that we can corroborate. Multiple journalists have indicated that there's soldiers dead. They talked about the soldiers dead. One British officer, right, said that he saw civilian bodies, but we don't know who that British officer was. That's the only report we have. None of the other reporting shows that this was even the case. No other journalists on the scene mentioned civilian bodies. And you'd think, right, because again, they did mention civilian bodies in other situations during the Gulf War, right? The civilian casualties were talked about in other incidences by journalists and things like that. So why not this one?
Yeah, that was something that because the one article that I did see that seemed to corroborate the fact that there was civilian casualties was just the Times Magazine report or retelling of everything that happened, and they said probably were. Yes.
That I'm familiar with the Times report. It says there probably were. They didn't know. There was no that wasn't an on the scene reporter. Right, it was someone just making a guess, and they were clear about it in the article. If you read it, right, it's very short. It's like a 3-paragraph thing.
Yeah, we just read it on stream.
Huh?
We just read it on stream.
Like they were very clear. Like they were just. It was just a guess. It was like there were probably civilian casualties, which is, I mean, fair enough guess in the aftermath of the moment, but we don't go off of guesses for this kind of thing, right?
Right. So I have less questions for you because I mostly agree with you on this. For like my total like take is it would be really interesting to like find out what processes there are in the military or like whatever that collect forensic evidence. It would be astonishing to me to find out that the U.S. military doesn't have some group of people go out after every single engagement and then, collect forensic evidence to like see exactly what happened.
We don't generally do that.
Do we not?
So we do it for high value targets, like for not Saddam Hussein, but Osama bin Laden. Remember, we took the DNA test, made sure it was him and things like that. In general, like we don't, the verification that we have as usual visual verification. I can't speak for the Gulf War era. Okay, they probably did it differently then. I don't know, but at least in the more modern era, I speak about modern era as if the Gulf War wasn't modern era. Anyway, what we did was so with a drone strike, at least you would strike the house, okay, and then to confirm the dead, you wouldn't go in with a forensic team. The drone would just get usually visual confirmation. If again, depending on the value of the target, right?
Gotcha. Okay, so there's not going to be, after some military engagement, some team that goes in.
Usually not.
Okay.
Usually.
I'm going to take your word for it, because you were in the military, right? At some point.
I was, but to be clear, I wasn't a frontline guy. I didn't deal with that.
Of course, yeah. I wasn't trying to insinuate that, but you have more knowledge than I do. Okay.
Yeah. If it's true that there was that happened, I am not aware of it, and we never dealt with it, at least in the Air Force. Okay. Again, this is the Air Force I can talk about, but why would they? So are you saying after every strike or incident that we do, we have a forensic team go in to do what? Exactly.
I would assume it's kind of like covering your own ass to make sure, okay, you know what? We're America. Everyone hates us. Everyone wants to always say that we're doing war crimes.
We don't care about that shit. Again, if there's an accusation and an investigation is opened, obviously, yes, we do. But for the most part, we just don't have the money or the manpower.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I maybe I've just been watching too much SVU, but I was just
CSI,
it feels like the United States would have a heavy interest in defending itself against claims of war crimes. But if they're not worried about war crimes, then I guess maybe it also makes just as much sense that they wouldn't.
And if there's a credible claim, but if we had to look, if every time someone on Twitter said that something was a war crime, we had to send in a forensic team to investigate it, we would go broke.
That makes sense. I guess I hadn't thought about that that aspect of it.
So it's got to be like a credible accusation, right? It can't just be Twitter people, right? But if there is a credible accusation, there will be an investigation opened, and that will go into it. But that's not at least that I'm aware. And it wouldn't make sense to me. That would be standing operator's procedure. That's why.
I guess the next question is what would be a piece of evidence that would change your mind on it? What would the standard of evidence be?
On civilian deaths, or on that this was a war crime?
Civilian deaths.
Show me a body.
Just show you a body?
Show me a body. Have someone who says a relative died in this come forward, right? And then I could at least engage with it, right?
Right.
But I heard that this guy said this one thing that he saw. I didn't see it, but he said he saw it, and no, I can't tell you who it was that said this. What am I supposed to do with that, right? That's not credible.
Fair. I think that even with the lack of a body, let's say that there was a burned out husk of a corpse, right? No way to identify it, but we can reasonably assume okay, this car was going the opposite direction. Doesn't seem like there are any weapons or remains of weapons in the car. We can, based off of this, and this, we can reasonably deduce that this person was not part of the Iraqi army. I don't think that happened at any point.
I mean, if there was enough information there, yes, but I just, even going the opposite direction, they were probably the soldiers were probably going the opposite direction too after they got boxed in, right? It was probably a chaotic little traffic jam, right, that they got stuck in. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the claim by Synth is that it is a war crime, but it was a justified war crime. Which
justified war crime? What does that even?
I understand what they're saying, right? Saying that legality isn't morality, and that while something might be listed as a crime, it might still be the moral thing to do, or something that is totally justifiable to do. And so Synth's position is that it is a war crime because there was some amount of time, a time deadline. A deadline on the on one of the UN resolutions, and they past that. But after that, there was another UN resolution that did not have a time limit on it, and they started to comply with that before the bombing.
What he's talking about, okay, or what they're talking about, sorry, is two resolutions. There's UN Resolution 660 and UN Resolution 678. So UN Resolution 660, I think it was made in August, the beginning of August of 91, and they said, hey, Iraq, you have until January 15th to GTFO, right? Get out of Kuwait, withdraw unilaterally, or we will come in and make you pay, right? And then 678 was the authorization to do so after that deadline passed. 678 was like, okay, nope, it passed. Let's go in. Coalition forces, let's do it, right? In February, right, of the year after the strikes, right, February 21st, I believe, there was a announcement on Baghdad radio saying that Saddam Hussein had agreed to comply with UN Resolution 660, and that he was going to start with retreating. With the words, according to the Washington Post, at least from a report, was that the words were he ordered a fighting withdrawal, right? That they were going to do a fighting withdrawal from that. Now, again, there was an overtures by Moscow at the time. As the Soviets were trying to negotiate and things like that. So there's an overture from Moscow saying they could get Saddam to agree to these terms if the U.S. would accept it, and the U.S. rejected it and did a counterproposal. So the idea, again, that they were just going to comply with this, right, resolution, they were still firing like on American troops. Like the day before, hours before the strike, the Highway of Death strike, Iraq launched a Scud missile at a U.S. Air Force. I don't know if it was Air Force base or Army base. I'm not sure. A U.S. Base, and they killed 28 servicemen, injured 100 more. So again, they can say that they're complying with this resolution all they want. They're still fighting Americans, right? They're still firing on them. It's not a war crime to destroy a military convoy that is going back to base, right? They, again, a lot of tanks got destroyed. It wasn't just civilian vehicles that they looted and that they commandeered that got destroyed. It was tanks, military vehicles, military supplies. It all just got messed up. So again, this idea that they were complying with a UN Resolution 660 doesn't matter. They were still fighting American forces.
Can you summarize what UN Resolution 660 was?
Yeah, UN Resolution 660 was Kuwait. Iraq is in violation of Kuwait's sovereignty. Get out. Get out of there by January 15th.
And they were not out there by January 15th.
And they were not out of there by January 15th.
Okay. Now, they were alluding to a second UN resolution.
678.
Okay. And what did that one say?
That one said, this was drafted again after it was either just before or just after the deadline passed. I'm pretty sure it was just after. That basically said, okay, they didn't, they violated this UN resolution, right? They didn't comply with the terms. This is an authorization, basically, to go in there and fuck shit up. So,
okay, gotcha. And were there any conditions on the second UN resolution that pointed towards, okay, if they do this, then we'll stop bombing?
Let me look. I can pull it up real quick.
Oh, sick.
Give me a second. I just want to make sure I get the numbers right. Sometimes I mess up the numbers, like 678 or 687, right? Like
yeah, no, I got you.
Minor dyslexia. So I just want to make sure I got the right number here for you. Because now I'm like, was it 688 or 687 or 686? Right now I'm getting that whole self-doubt going.
No, I got you. I totally understand.
Yeah, I think it was 686. Okay, resolution 660, 686. No, that wasn't it.
Okay, so I have someone linked me 660 in chat. Let me see here. Oh shit! 1 second, I gotta fix my headphones. 1 second, I gotta take them off.
Yeah. So again, oh, it take
All right. Here. Oh, actually, hold on. I'm just gonna do a little something here. All right. Sorry, I had to pull up my hood. I wanted to fit in.
Oh no, it's all good.
All right. Let me see here.
Yeah, UNCS Resolution 678. It says, invoking Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, Iraq was once offered one final chance to implement 660, which demanded that Iraq withdraw its forces unconditionally from Kuwait on 29th of November. So again, this was passed months before the actual invasion.
Yeah, can you link this to me so that I can read along with you?
Okay, I was a little bit wrong on that. So this was the one that gave them the deadline. And it gave Iraq until 15th of January 1991 to withdraw from Kuwait and empowered states to use all necessary means to force Iraq out of Kuwait after the deadline. The resolution requested member states to keep the council informed on their decisions. This was the legal authorization for the Gulf War, as Iraq did not withdraw by the deadline. So,
okay, let me see here. So you're reading 661?
No, this is a 678.
Link that to me real quick, just so I can follow along here.
And this is a Wikipedia version. So
yeah, of course. When all the based people go to research. Okay, let's see here.
Well, I tried to avoid it in an actual debate, but when we're just talking, it's.
I mean, yeah. At that point, you use the sources, but okay. Reforming. Iraq continued to defy the Security Council. Okay. Iraq one final chance to implement Resolution 660, which demanded that Iraq withdraw its forces unconditionally from Kuwait to the positions in which they were located on 1st of August 1990, the day before the invasion of Kuwait began. This one passed under Canada, the guidance of Canada, the USSR. Gotcha. This was the legal authorization for the Gulf War, as Iraq did not withdraw by the deadline. Sticks and carrots. Okay, let me look at criticism. International law experts such as Professor Burns H. Weston have argued the UN Security Council resolution set a dubious precedent by backing away from the peaceful humanitarian process and principles. Okay. Let me see if Synth... Can you explain briefly?
Well, I can tell you what the argument is, right?
Yeah, go for it.
The argument is, well, they were UN Resolution 678 authorizing to use all means necessary to drive Iraq from Kuwait. And if they were saying they were going to withdraw from Kuwait, then victory, mission accomplished, right? It was done. But what that fails to count into is, like, again, during conflict, there was no indication that they would stay out of Kuwait, right? That they would not, like, they would continue to not be in Kuwait. And if they wanted to surrender, many did, right? If, as we know from the Gulf War, entire regiments of Iraqi troops just surrendered, right? So rather than surrendering, they decided to withdraw and take the hostages, loot, right? Alleged hostages, I should say, loot and weapons of war back. Again, we as Bush said at the time, Bush Senior, to be clear, we just don't trust the guy, right? Why would we? He'd lied before. He's lied through this whole process. So. They were still fighting us.
Okay, so I understand the argument that they're making now. Got it. So the Resolution 660 demanded immediate withdrawal to their positions on the 1st of August 1990, before where they were before the invasion. But this one doesn't have a specific end day. Whereas, where'd it go? 678, let me see here, did have an end date. It gave Iraq until 15th of January 1991 to withdraw from Kuwait. So I guess what there are, okay. So I don't think this is a war crime at all, unless there's some. Okay. Okay. So unless there's some sort of weird legal thing that says that the stipulations in every resolution is always enforceable or whatever, right? Then you can't say, if that doesn't exist, then you can't say this was a war crime, because this is basically a rehashing. I'm losing the correct word here, but this is like a redraft of the original resolution that says you have to leave immediately, which doesn't give an end date. This one says, okay, you're going to leave or we're going to blow you the up, and you have until the 15th of January. So I feel like this one would supersede the previous one.
So, and again, remember, like, there were negotiations going on behind the scenes at this time. And Bush on the 22nd, right? Because on the 21st, they got an offer from Moscow. Let's remember, they got an offer from Moscow. There's about 8 conditions given. I can link you to something that goes through them, right? The conditions were, these were the 8 main points of the conditions. Iraq would announce a full and unconditional withdrawal of troops from Kuwait. Withdrawal would begin 2 days after a ceasefire. Withdrawal would be completed on a fixed schedule to be determined. UN economic sanctions would cease to be in effect after 2/3 of the Iraq troops have withdrawn, and all other UN resolutions would lapse after Iraq forces left Kuwait. All POWs would be released immediately. The UN would compose a commission to monitor this pullout, designating countries not involved in the conflict, and additional details would be settled as the agreement is implemented. That was the offer given by Moscow, Saddam, saying, okay, under these conditions, we'll stop, right? Bush rejected that, and on the next day, he gave a counter. And the counteroffer was pull out to begin by noon of Saturday, right? Which was the 23rd, to be clear. It must be completed in 1 week, and Iraq must be out of Kuwait City in 48 hours and allow the Kuwaiti government to return. They rejected that, right? They rejected that. And thus, again, a ceasefire wasn't agreed to until March, the beginning of the March, right? So again, this idea that they were going to comply with the UN Resolution 660 by withdrawing, they can't just unilaterally declare that, right? They were at war. It was a conflict. They were fighting us. There was again, the words Saddam used in his orders were a fighting withdrawal. And if you are still fighting us, no matter where you're going to, what borders you're going to, we are allowed to fight back.
Right. Okay. I have a better grasp on this now.
Please.
Okay. I think that unless I am given some sort of information that shows that the 660 would supersede 678, I don't think that there's any reason to say that this was a war crime whatsoever.
There's never been any charges brought. No serious. Well, I mean,
we're America. Who's going to prosecute us? Am I right?
Oh, they've brought charges. Like sure, but like again.
No, I understand. I'm not trying to knock down your point or anything, but
it's okay to knock it down if it's knockdownable. But the only thing we have, right? The only thing that ever came of this in regards is from Ramsey Clark, right? And he put together a report that he presented to the International War Crimes Tribunal, right? And it was called a report on United States war crimes against Iraq. And this was done, I think, late 1991, May 1991 is when they presented it to the International War Crimes Tribunal. Nothing came of it. If you read it, I can link you the site. It's just full of half truths, half baked assumptions, things like that. One of their witness testimony in regards to the highway of death, which is what is being argued here. Because if you want to argue that the United States possibly did some war crimes during the Gulf War, maybe, I don't know, right? But if we're talking about the highway of death specifically, no. So again, in the testimony by Joyce Chediak, who is a Lebanese American journalist, it's not clear that she was even there on that day in her report, and she claims that she saw tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers, their charred and dismembered bodies. But we know from other sources that, again, tens and thousands didn't die during this incident, right?
Right.
Even soldiers, there was like 200, maybe 1,000. The death count was very low, actually.
Yeah, like for what it looks like, it definitely is. It is way lower from what I would expect. Looking at those pictures.
Yeah, and like this is the problem. It's just this aesthetics that a lot of people will do. Like, it looks bad, so it must be bad. So we're going to use all our evidence to try to show what our initial impression was. Right? It's just not. It's not a healthy or honest way of dealing with the point. Right? And again, if you want to go after America for some of the shit it's done some shit. You can go to the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, right? We can talk about some of the stuff that was done during the Korean War. Look, we could even talk about Abu Ghraib, things like that, right?
Yeah, of course.
We don't need to make shit up. We don't need to make shit up about America.
And to be like good faith to Synth after the conversation. Synth's point wasn't that like America bad or anything. It really, like, as much as we like point out like the style of debate that Synth loves, right, and all that crew loves to do is hyper autistic. The disagreement was also hyper autistic, like pedantic shit.
I didn't have time for that. My day off. I went live on my day off, and I was like, okay, we're going to have a discussion. I did that guy a favor. And then he comes in with this pedantic princess shit. I didn't have time for it, right? I just got annoyed and I left. So.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, too. Because, like, I also, like, we've both been pretty irked about all of the stupid shit being said around Israel and Palestine, and then broadly all the like America hating lefties and all that shit. So like, yeah, I 1,000,000% get it.
Plus, everyone loves when I scream a little bit, so you know.
Okay, this is my final little critique that I'll leave you with. All right, so we all know and love Haas infrared. All right.
My mic issues. Okay, I understand. I will fix it. That's my bad.
Hey, I'm not even saying that like the gain was too high or anything. The volume was too loud. I don't think I've ever heard a microphone fail only in one ear and then like move over to the other ear. Like my left ear headphone stopped giving me any input before my right ear did. And so there was like this weird oscillation of noise when you were screaming.
I'm too powerful, okay? Sound itself cannot contain me, okay?
Absolutely.
These electronics, right? My smoke is too tough. My bitch is too bad. You know? It's just how it is.
Are you using the microphone on your headset there?
No, this doesn't actually work.
Okay, I was about to say, because like the audio quality is too good for it to be that, but like also he is blowing the up out of his microphone right now. Maybe it is.
I do need a better microphone. That is on my list. Just before I go, let me tell you what I got coming up this week, and it'll be
go
fun.
For it.
Tomorrow is going to be a therapy culture.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday's Collins. Wednesday we're going to talk about the canvassing house in Ohio. You should come, by the way.
I want to. I am poor though, so
you know what? They have a budget set aside to help poor people get a hotel, right? So if you contact them and you fill out the form and maybe I can even put a word in for you, they can, if you can get there, they can help out with your accommodations.
Well, I might take you up on that. I have to see what's going on. What month is it happening?
It's on February 9th to 11th, right? That weekend.
Okay, February 9th to 11th. Oh, so it's like really coming up.
Yeah. So sooner is better that you get a hold of me and I can see what I can do for you.
Yeah, I will figure that out sometime tonight
and hang out with you and stuff.
Yeah, no, I'd love to meet. I'm trying to think if there's any other like final memes that I want to ask. But
no, the big show I want to tell you about was Friday.
Yes, tell me.
Friday, me and Destiny are going to be teaming up to debate Non-Smoker and one of his pals on the Houthis thing. So. Yeah. That'll be fun.
Who's moderating that?
Non-Smoker. It's on his show. So I was told to bring a buddy, and Destiny agreed. So
it's Non-Smoker and who?
Alistar the Great. I don't know them.
I have heard that name. I don't remember who it is though.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm excited for that. That's when? Friday?
Friday, yeah. Time to be determined. I think it's going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern, but I need to make sure before I start spreading misinformation. So,
alrighty. Well, hey, man, thanks for coming on. I'm learning so much today.
I hope I gave you a lot to think about.
Absolutely. Love you, buddy. Bye. All right. If you guys haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube or follow me on Kick. And, we have the memberships on YouTube. We have the subscriptions on Kick. If you guys want to, throw a couple of bucks my way, there are some nice little treats for you. Different emotes and different AI things that the editor can do for you. All right. I'm really bad at promoing. I love you guys very much.